You guys, if I'm being honest with you, I am still nervous about this whole thing because obviously it's still quite new to me, and as with most things, it's a practice makes perfect situation, and so hopefully you guys will indulge me until I get there, you know. So today's video is on a book review, and the book I'm reviewing is Dan Brown's latest offering, which is called Origin. Started reading this book last November, and I finished it at the end of April, girls and boys. End of April. So it took me a good 5 to 6 months to actually finish this book. So when I opened this book, where do I even start? Actually, this is not going to be an emotional video, so let's just make it quick and snappy so we can get to the review. So a few days after I opened this book, I got news that my mom passed away. And if you know me, it's no secret, my mom had cancer and she had fought very hard, but it was such a short fight. So at the time leading up to those months, I'd spent a lot of time with her, and I had learned to use books as my remedy. So whenever I needed to feel less, or whenever I needed to get out of my head, I would pick up a book. So from like May last year until November, I had been on some reading spree because it really helped me to maintain a healthy state of mind. So a few days before I heard the news, this was the book that I was reading, and I have not read anything since. I had not read anything since I'd heard this until I finished this book. And there would be moments where I felt like, let me just start a new book. But a part of me just didn't want to do that. I felt like it would mean a lot for me and my healing if I could read and finish this book and be able to process it and then move on to another book. Because I think part of grief is that it gets us stuck in a lot of things, like, yeah, and it had the potential to do this. I've never had, with this specific part of my life, I've never had a book that took me 5 to 6 months to finish, and I was not reading anything else in between. So whenever I'd hunger for a bit of reading, which obviously I had stopped being interested in because after that I reached such a devastating slump. So if I felt like, okay, I think I am okay to open a book now and actually go through something that has to do with books, obviously it would be easier going onto BookTube and hearing about books than to actually participate in the act of reading. I would literally open this book, even if it meant that I would read just one page, even if it's that last page of the chapter. But the struggle with that is that I had to keep reminding myself of what happened in the story prior to that. And yet still I totally refused. Totally refused to read anything else. Currently, I think there was a huge turning point. One of my closest friends is getting married, and she had like a ceremony at her home in Mthuthuzeli, which is where I'm from, and I went down in the last weekend of April, and I took this book with me. Didn't read it on the way down. We had driven down with some of her family, but on the way back, I read it and I finished it. And for me, that was a huge moment because it marked the turn of something in my current state, because I could go firstly somewhere and celebrate something beautiful with another human being, something that I think when you're grieving you don't even imagine you have the capacity to do. And right after that I managed to finish and put behind me a book that will forever remind me of a certain period in my life. So it was very significant reading this book for me. And so before I say a lot more that I actually shouldn't be saying, let us get into it. Okay, so this is Dan Brown's 5th book, right? So his first Angels and Demons, then the Da Vinci Code, then The Lost Symbol, and then Inferno. So if I'm being honest with you guys, the only book of Dan Brown's where he follows Professor Robert Langdon that I ever read was the Da Vinci Code. And I enjoyed that book actually a lot. And I remember I had given it to my mom to read as well. And her first comment after finishing reading it was, why is all of this, like all of this in these pages happening in the space of one night? And I laughed so hard because the power of suspension of disbelief, for me, that was not my thought at all after reading that book. Like, it was the last thing on my mind, because I felt like the way that Dan Brown narrated that story, as similar to how he narrated this one, was so powerful that the suspension of disbelief was a thing. Like, I didn't think that, I didn't associate time with the book at all. But because she pointed that out, and this is the second book that I've read of his, so I looked out for that and I was like, yep. Similar thing, like one day, one night, a whole, let me look for you, I'll tell you how many pages. A whole, no, not acknowledgements. A whole 456 pages, huh? So you can just imagine how much he has packed in there. So this book stays true to the tropes that he's used before in his Langdon books. I've tried to watch some of the movies in terms of The Lost Symbol and Inferno, and it didn't happen. So all I know of Langdon is from the Da Vinci Code, and he's still curious about symbols, he is still curious about religion, and Dan Brown is still talking about the same things that he was talking about in the Da Vinci Code, not necessarily in terms of the content being a replica, but in terms of the motivation of his story. So in this book we follow Professor Langdon and another dazzling young woman, as per always, when they attend a lecture, or rather they attend a presentation by one of Langdon's former students, Edmund Kirsch, who is a renowned futurist and atheist of the time. The story is based in Spain, and Kirsch has made himself a home in Spain. He's very fascinated with the arts and with technology, and his question that he wants to answer, or rather two questions that he wants to answer, are where do we come from, which is an answer he's looking for outside of religion, outside of what we've already been told, and where are we going? Again, obviously his questions are conflicting with whatever religious beliefs is currently out there in society. What I admire about Dan Brown's style of narrating stories is that he intertwines true things that we know as truth, things that we can point at as true, whether it be through symbols, through landmarks, through historically recorded events, etc. And he intertwines them so intricately well with fiction, let me call it that, with fiction, that by the time that you get to the fiction, your mind almost does a two-step, you know, like, whoa, what just happened there? And it's almost a debate in your head of, is this true? Is this not true? Could this be true? You know? And I don't know about you, but when I'm reading something, unless I'm really challenged about something being presented to me as fact, I don't have time to research on the side. I'm like, oh yes, yeah, okay, that, yeah, you just told me something that I know, so this must be true, okay, So that's one thing that I think he does very well. And it's the same as not considering time when you are reading a book, not considering the time that is going past. It's that whole art of the suspension of disbelief. And I don't know if I've come across an author that does it so well. Okay, back to the book. So it's set in Spain, and on his presentation day, Kirsch is gonna tell the whole of religious Spain and the whole world just what he's discovered about where we come from and where we're going. Obviously, it's controversial. It's coming from an atheist. It's coming from a futurist, and he, prior to the presentation, had met with the religious greats, of various religious groups. So it was Christianity, I think the other was, I want to say Jewish. Guys, forgive me, because like I said, I did read this in drips and drabs. But he meets with major religious leaders and gives them a snippet or tells them about his discovery. And on telling them about his discovery, mayhem breaks loose, and they beg him not to reveal what he has discovered, because the repercussions may be greater than what he is anticipating himself. However, he goes ahead and he does it, and by the time he does it, he met with three religious leaders. By the time his presentation comes along, 2 of them have died. Then we see that there is someone who is hired to end Kirsch's life. Kirsch is killed, and we spend the whole time trying to find out A, who killed him, B, what is it that he was actually trying to show us, and C, whether or not this young lady that is now acquaintances with Kirsch, she was Kirsch's acquaintance, Ambra Vidal. Okay, so Ambra is the fiance to Julian, who is the Prince of Spain and is about to take over reins from his sickly father. So she is also the curator of the Guggenheim Museum in Spain, and that's how she became friends with Kirsch. And Kirsch wanted to have his presentation at her museum, but he was really very secretive as to what it is that he was going to share with the world. So she didn't know much about it, but events that transpire end up engraving her in the rest of the story, to a point where she and Langdon then start the journey to discovering what it is that Kirsch wanted to share with the world. So events transpire during the presentation, and the presentation is not presented on the night or time scheduled. Part of it is, but the real presentation, the real discovery, we don't learn on that night. And we follow Ambra Vidal and Professor Robert Langdon through Spain, trying by all means to get this discovery aid. And as we go along, various people come up. There's a former soldier called Avila, I think that's the name of the soldiers. The soldier who has his own gripes with religion. There is the king, as mentioned. There is a bishop, the one that survived. There is Ambra, there is Professor Langdon, and there is an artificial intelligence character that I feel Dan has, he done did it with that character. Like, he is so believable, he is so lovable, yet as your heart starts to pound for this robot, you learn why he's not human and how he can never be human. Anyway, I'm not trying to bring any spoilers into this, so I can't really say a lot. I'm trying not to say a lot actually, but say enough for you to be intrigued by the story. So we follow them, and because Dan is fascinated with symbols and history and religion, etc., a whole lot of that is woven into it, and you learn a few things about Spain, you learn a few things about religion, and you learn a few things about other symbols that he hasn't mentioned before in his previous books. The entire thing happens in a space of 2 days, if I will collect the hours properly, and eventually, obviously, we know that eventually we always know that Professor Langdon always wins, and whatever we are meant to learn, we end up learning. However, the fascination is the motives behind the actions of the main characters. It is every single one of these characters has that moment where you go, oh, I never saw that coming. And when I mean every single one of these characters has a skeleton in the closet, let me put it that way, or rather reveals to us just how much of most of our actions are driven by emotion. And it is fascinating the damage that occurs because of that. And also the struggle to understand how you can relate to an AI, artificial intelligence character as human, and when they portray to you that in fact they're not human, there's some form of offense and heartbreaking that will occur. So what else can I tell you? So they obviously win at the end, and we learn what the discovery is, and part of what Kirsch does discover is true. It's true of what's going on in today's world, especially when he's talking about where we are going. And I think perhaps I can engage that in a discussion video to follow. If I don't do the discussion video, guys, I do apologize, but I do intend to delve more into this in a more spoiler related video. But all in all, I gave this 4 stars. I may have been very generous because of what I explained at the start of this video. However, I really do feel like Dan Brown's artistry is lost in the noise of, oh, not another Dan Brown book. Some people I've come across have said that. And even for me, like, there was no other book that I was ever interested in reading after the Da Vinci Code, but I'm glad I picked this up, and I feel like it's well narrated, and it does what a thriller / suspense is meant to do, and for that I think it deserved 4 stars, which is what I gave it. Thank you so much, guys, for watching. I know this was a quick review. It is my first review of this channel. I don't know if you guys heard how nervous I was, but going forward, I think I'm gonna choose specific elements to actually consider after telling you guys the synopsis and my point of view of the book. But I hope that this was enough to get you interested in this story. And until next time, please like, subscribe, and share.